And turning now to breaking news, a jury has recommended that convicted Pittsburgh Synagogue shooter Robert Bowers be sentenced to death for the nation's deadliest attack on the Jewish community. The U.S. Attorney's Office is now holding a news conference. Let's listen in.
Throughout the building. Ultimately, it was these same courageous SWAT operators who took the defendant into custody, but not until he shot at them twice and wounded multiple officers. The work of Pittsburgh tactical EMS medics who entered with the SWAT team saved lives that day. We are forever grateful for their service. Many other law enforcement agencies from throughout the region raced to Squirrel Hill to assist on that morning, including the Pennsylvania State Police, the South Hills Area Community of Governments, the Northern Regional Police Department, and the Ross Township Police Department. On behalf of our office, I want to thank every one of our state and local partner agencies who supported the initial response that day. We are grateful for the professionalism and dedication of the staff of the Allegheny County Office of the Medical Examiner, who were some of the first personnel in the building and who were responsible for some of the most difficult early work. Our partners from the FBI were also there that morning. As the lead agency, the FBI has worked every single day since to investigate this case and support this prosecution. The special agents, analysts, victim specialists, and support personnel who processed the crime scene and who have worked on this case since that day have devoted hundreds and hundreds of hours toward this effort. In particular, I want to recognize the unparalleled commitment of the FBI case agents, Special Agents Brian Collins and Samantha Bell. There are no finer agents in law enforcement, and we are proud to stand with them every day. We also want to recognize the contributions of the dedicated staff at the FBI's laboratory at Quantico, who shouldered the enormous task of analyzing hundreds of pieces of forensic evidence in this case, and who were critical in reconstructing, to the extent they could, what happened inside the synagogue that morning. We are also grateful to the ATF and its valuable assistance throughout. Our team at the U.S. Attorney's Office has been working without interruption on this case since the day of the shooting. I have never seen an office come together in pursuit of justice and in support of a community like our office did in those early days. Every single person in this office, from lawyers to paralegals to legal assistants, worked together to make sure that this case was investigated thoroughly and that the defendant was held accountable for his crimes. Victim witness specialist Adrienne Howe has dedicated herself to supporting the victims in this case and making sure that their statutory rights are respected. Adrienne's work is a model for how to build and maintain trust between prosecuting offices and the victim community. We are so fortunate to have her here in the Western District of Pennsylvania. I also need to recognize the unwavering dedication of my trial partners and colleagues from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Assistant United States Attorneys Troy Ravetti, Sue Song, and Nicole Vasquez-Schmidt, as well as trial attorney Mary Hahn from the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, and trial attorneys Barry Disney and A.J. Stewart from the Department of Justice's Criminal Division. Finally, I have to acknowledge the victims. This case, at its core, is about the victims, the ones who are no longer with us, and the ones who have so bravely and gracefully carried the trauma of that day every day since. This case has always been about those who survived and those who bear witness for the 11 who did not. Joyce Feinberg, Richard Gottfried, Rose Mallinger, Jerry Rabinowitz, Cecil Rosenthal, David Rosenthal, Bernice Simon, Sylvan Simon, Dan Stein, Melvin Wax, and Irving Younger. The victims and family members have been a constant source of support and strength throughout the long road that has been this case. They have been a valued presence in the courthouse every single day since the jury selection process started months ago. They have testified as witnesses in this trial. They shared their loss and pain, and their strength is an inspiration. The formal sentencing hearing will take place tomorrow. Victims will exercise their statutory right to speak, to share the impact of their losses, to describe how the defendant's crimes have impacted them and their families. And then the judge will impose his formal sentence. The evidence in this trial proved that the defendant acted because of white supremacist, anti-Semitic, and bigoted views that unfortunately are not original or unique to him. Sadly, they are too common. Our Constitution protects a person's right to hold repugnant beliefs. But our Constitution also protects every person's right to practice his or her faith. And when people who espouse white supremacist, anti-Semitic, and bigoted views pick up weapons and use them to kill or to try to kill people because of their faith, our office and our partners in law enforcement will hold them accountable to the fullest extent of the law each and every time. I want to acknowledge Christopher Ragland, Assistant and Acting Police Chief from the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police, who's standing here today. And I'll now ask Assistant Special Agent in Charge Christopher Giordano to make a few remarks on behalf of the FBI.
All right, we are going to take a short break. You are listening to the U.S. District Attorney, the U.S. Attorney's Office speak about the death penalty in this case. Gonna catch a quick break. We will be right back. You're watching Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, diving deeper into the Gilgo Beach serial murders. What more have we learned after the defendant's court appearance? Our experts break down the latest evidence and what's next in the investigation. And on the docket, former That 70s Show star Danny Masterson faces life in prison after a jury found him guilty of rape. We'll bring you all the details as his sentencing hearing moves closer.
Closing Arguments, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
And we've been bringing you a news conference in Pennsylvania. This is some breaking news. This is after a jury recommended convicted Pittsburgh Synagogue shooter be sentenced to death. Let's get you back in for more.
Thank you, U.S. Attorney Olsham. Today marks the end of one of the darkest chapters in this city's history. Nearly 5 years ago, members of the Tree of Life, Dor Hadash, and New Light congregations had their lives changed forever. They were going about their normal Saturday routine when the sound of gunshots rang out. One hate-filled individual shattered their time of community and reflection by killing 11 congregants, wounding others, including responding police officers, heroes, running towards the sound of gunfire to protect those in need. For the last several months, the families who lost their loved ones and the community have had to relive every second of what happened that day. Today's verdict will never bring back the 11 members of the synagogue who were killed. But to those families who lost loved ones, I hope today allows you to close this terrible chapter and continue moving forward and continue healing. I know that's a hard ask, and nothing may ever bring you complete closure. But please know, we are here for you now, just as we were then, and we will continue to be here for you in the future. Victim specialists have worked with the impacted families since day one, and our work does not end with this sentencing today. I would like to thank the jury for their time and diligence throughout the trial. I know this process has been difficult. And lastly, I want to commend the work done by my FBI personnel, the assistant U.S. attorneys, the Pittsburgh Police, and all of our partner agencies who put in countless hours at the scene that day and every day since preparing for this trial. I have never been more proud to be an FBI agent and stand in the shadow of my case team and the entire partners up here for today's verdict. Unfortunately, what happened at the Tree of Life Synagogue was not the first attack at a house of worship, and it hasn't been the last. I want to assure everyone that the FBI will keep doing everything we can for the people who need it most in our most vulnerable communities and in every community across this country. We are more than just special agents, intelligence analysts, and professional staff at the FBI. We are part of these communities. We live in these communities and we serve in these communities. And I want to make one thing perfectly clear. Hate has no place in our community. We will stop at nothing to keep our community safe. Again, I hope today brings some comfort to those impacted by this terrible crime and to our communities. As we work to heal together, I want to remind everyone that no one can do this alone. We need your help to stop these types of attacks. We need your partnerships to move forward. We are all in this together. Thank you.
Okay, we just finished listening to the news conference for the U.S. Attorney's Office discussing the jury's decision to give Robert Bowers death. I want to bring in our guests, former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney Marie Pereira in New York, and in Hawaii, homicide detective Phil Waters. Thank you both for sticking with us this afternoon. Marie, I'm going to just start with you. I'm not surprised by the jury's decision, are you?
I'm not surprised, but I'm happy because you never know. It only takes one.
Yes, it
The
does.
jurors ignored his defense that he had epilepsy, schizophrenia, brain impairment that caused his delusion and caused him to slaughter these people. They recognized it was a hate crime. It was an anti-Semitic hate crime. To be clear about it, and they're holding him accountable in the most impactful way, and they're taking his life like he took the lives of those 11 innocent worshipers on that day, and they did right this time.
Absolutely, just seeing pictures of all the victims there, it's just heartbreaking. Tomorrow we are going to hear from the victims' families. Phil, any thoughts on what you think we're going to hear them talk about?
I think they're going to be very appreciative of the efforts that were made by law enforcement and the prosecutors and the jury. Quite frankly, I think that, you know, the chief there used the term closure. I never use that term. I don't like that term because it can never be achieved. And when I always told people that when I was involved in homicide investigations, and I've been involved in 9 capital murder investigations that resulted in the death penalty, and I'm a pro-death penalty guy when it is appropriate. And what I always told the victims' families when I met with them was that I was going to try to find the right person who's done the wrong thing and bring about a measure of justice and hopefully some peace for them, because that wound that's been created because of this evil act will never be closed. And I think what we're going to see tomorrow is that we're going to see an expression of love from those victims' families, and a great appreciation for the people that brought about the measure of justice here, and some peace for those families.
Yeah, Phil, hopefully a little bit of healing gets to start taking place. Marie, I just want to kind of talk again about what we talked about just before. It only takes one, and I think that's hard for a lot of people to understand. You have to get the jurors to all agree. This has to be unanimous if they're going to decide on the death penalty, and that is not easy to do.
It's not easy to do, and this week alone, we've seen many, many cases. We saw the Burgos case where he murdered that small child and his girlfriend who was taking him to court for child support. We saw Nicholas Cruz go free. The only difference here, I think, with him is that he's an adult shooter. He's an adult hater, and he did it specifically because he had anti-Semitic views. And I think the jurors called him to task on what he did, and they decided to take his life. I'm glad they did, because there's always a possibility that one person is going to say, you know what, let God choose who dies. And I'm glad that person was not on the jury.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about, Marie just brought up the Burgos case. I was covering that case in Laredo, and the district attorney there made a impassioned closing argument for the death penalty, but the jurors came back. Now, that was a very Catholic community. They came back and did not recommend the death penalty to the judge, but he is going to be spending the rest of his life in prison. In that case, the father of the defendant did get on the stand, and I really do think that made a difference, hearing from the dad in that case to not give his son the death penalty. Phil, any closing thoughts? Want to get the last thought from you.
Well, I agree with Marie. I'll tell you what, this discussion of the death penalty, she's absolutely right, and that's what happened in the Burgos case. It only takes one. I have had a couple of cases, capital murder cases. They were going for the death penalty, and one person changed the whole scope of that. So I agree here that these are tough times. You know, there's when they decide, at least in Texas, when they decide on the death penalty, there's two questions that have to be answered. Is there any mitigation? And is this person a continuing threat to society? So in this particular case, yes, he is a continuing threat. And was there any mitigation? No. Yeah. This was an evildoer who went out and committed this abhorrent act of evil upon a group of people because, as we've already talked about, he had such hate for these folks. So there's evil in the world, and I think this guy has been given his just due. And the day that he's finally, I use the term rehabilitated, will not come too soon.
Yeah, I agree with you, Phil. Yeah, back in that Laredo case, the jury did say that the state proved beyond a reasonable doubt that this defendant would commit continuing acts of violence, but then they said they found some mitigating circumstances. What those were, we will never know, but they obviously found them. Here, not the case.